Welcome! This tutorial will show you how to assign titles to historic photographs for digital collections included in the Recollection Wisconsin search engine. In this tutorial, we'll first take a look at locating and transcribing existing titles from historic photos. Then we'll look at some tips for creating titles for photographs that do not have existing titles. We'll look at the characteristics of a good title, and we'll show you how to create a new title based on a simple formula. We'll share a number of examples so you can see how titles are created for different types of images, including photos of people, buildings, events, and activities. First, let's look at photographs that already contain a title. Existing titles are usually assigned by a photographer or a publisher. You might find an existing title printed on a postcard or handwritten on a photograph. If an image contains an existing title, you should transcribe it exactly. In this example, we can see a handwritten title at the lower right corner of the image. So we'll copy it down as written. Bird's Eye View, number 4, 1908, Barneveld, Wis. And that will be our title for the photo. Of course, most historic images do not have existing titles, so if no title exists, you'll need to create one. So what makes a good title? In general, it should be descriptive, specific, and relatively short. Keep in mind that your title is your user's first point of access to a photo, so make your titles informative and specific. At the same time, keep your titles short and simple. The place for more detailed information is in your description and your other metadata fields. There's also some formatting rules to keep in mind when creating titles for photos in a digital collection. First of all, you should capitalize the first word and any proper names, such as the names of people, places, and institutions. But you don't need to capitalize every word in the title. Second, try to avoid starting your titles with the words a or the. And finally, there's no need to add a period at the end of your title. So, what kinds of information should you include when creating a title? Here's our simple formula: subject, location, and date. Start by identifying the subject of a photo. Who or what is in this photo? Identify any people, buildings, or locations that are depicted as the main subjects of the image. Then, identify the location where the photo was taken. Include the name of the city, or the township, or the county, but not all three. So for example, if the city name is known, include that. If the city is not known, record the township name or the county name. Finally, include the year the photo was created, if that's known. Use a specific year or a date range, but not general terms like 19th century or late 1900s. If you can't be specific or include a date range within about 20 years, for example 1920 to 1940, just leave out the date. You might not always be able to identify the subject, location, and date for every photograph in your collection, but that's okay. Just leave out any parts of the formula that you don't know. So let's take a look at our first example. This one's pretty straightforward. It's a portrait of a single individual. And following our formula, we're going to identify the person's name, the location of the photo, and the date. So in this case, we know our subject is Albert Townsend, the location is Clintonville, and the date is 1927. This next example is a little more complicated. There's a lot happening in this photo, so how can we break it down to create a useful title? Let's look first at the who, where, and when. We can see a large group of women and children lined up on a sidewalk in front of some shops, and from our records, we know that this photo came from somewhere in Manitowoc County between about 1890 and 1900. So if we put all that together, we've got our subject, women and children with babies in carriages, our location, Manitowoc County, and our date range, 1890 to 1900. More specific details, like the board sidewalk and the names of the shops, do not need to be included in the title. That information can be added later in our description. Photos of buildings follow a similar pattern to photos of people. We'll start with the subject, the name of the building. If the building has an official name, use that. If there's no official name for the building, use a descriptive name like Smith House or Episcopal Church. Next, identify the location of the building, the name of the city or the township or the county. Since many of the building photos in Recollection Wisconsin come from university collections, we included campus as an option here too. And then finally identify the date of the photograph if that's known. So in this example, we have Albert Seaver Memorial Hall as our subject and Milwaukee Downer College as our location. And the date is unknown, so we leave that out. Here's another example of a building photograph, but this time it's not just a single building, but a view of a street. So again, we'll identify the subject, the name of the street or the block or another view, and the location and the date. So here we have our title, 100 block of South Main Street, Fort Atkinson, 1949. Okay, so now that we've got the basic formula down, let's make things a little more complicated. Here we'll add activities or events into the mix. And again, we'll start by identifying the subject of the photo. Who or what is in this photo? Identify any people, buildings, or locations that are depicted as the main subjects of the image. Next, identify what's happening in the photo. Is there an action, like running or dancing or reading? Or an event, like a parade, or a lecture, or a ceremony? Then identify the location where the photo was taken. Include the name of the city, or the township, or the county, but not all three. And then finally include the date the photo was taken, if that's known. Here's an example of a photograph that includes an activity or action. We can see a tailor measuring a customer, and we know that this photo is from two rivers, and we can assume that it's the 20th century, but we don't know a specific date. So translating that information into a title, we might get tailor measuring a man in a suit in two rivers. Here's another example. The elements we can identify in this photo are an elephant, a trainer, and a woman on a swing. And we know from our records that this photo was taken in Evansville, Wisconsin in the 1940s. So putting that together into a title, we get our subject, trainer with circus elephant, our action, holding a woman on a swing, and our location and date, Evansville, 1940 to 1949. So to wrap up our title tutorial, let's briefly review the elements of creating a good title for a historic photograph. Your title should be descriptive, specific, and relatively short. Keep in mind that your title is your user's first point of access to a photo. There are also some formatting rules to keep in mind. First of all, capitalize the first word and proper names, such as people, places, and institutions, but do not capitalize every word in the title. Try to avoid starting your titles with the words a or the, and there's no need to add a period at the end of your title. You can use our simple formula of subject, activity, location, and date to help you build useful descriptive titles. If you need more help with creating titles or other descriptive metadata for your digital collection, you can always refer to our full guidelines available on our website at recollectionwisconsin.org/guidelines. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us